Why do you think that modern day marriages are failing at an exponential rate?
Well, I think my personal opinion is the feminist movement that started way back in the 60s. It was great to give women equal pay for equal work. That's awesome. But it has wreaked havoc on romantic relationships because it has told women, in order to be powerful, put your kids in daycare. It will diminish you to just stay at home and raise kids. You won't have enough power. You need to go out. You need to work like a man. You need to become a man. The feminist movement asks the question, what do we need men for? Like we can do everything ourselves. Awesome. I can do a lot of things myself, but guess what? I don't want to. I like having a man. I like having a companion. I like being treated like a woman. But women these days, they have become so masculine, and no man wants to be married to another man. If he's a straight man, anyway, right?
Right.
He doesn't, and you can't have two masculine energy people in a relationship. You've got to have a masculine energy and a feminine energy for a relationship to work. It's like you got to have a president and a vice president. You got a king and a queen. You can't have two kings over a nation. You can't have two presidents over a nation. You need to have one that leads and one that follows. And so women, because of the feminist movement, have learned and been inundated, and I believe they drank the KoolAid. They drank the KoolAid of the feminist movement, and now they can't find a man that wants to marry them.
So I agree with you. I believe that a lot of that too, not just the feminist movement, a lot of that too has to do with their mothers raising them to be independent women and not good wives.
Yeah.
Because of their failed relationship or failed marriage, right? Because you failed, you're not a bad person, okay? We've all failed at something, but you learn, right? And I see a lot of these ladies now that their moms have ingrained in them.
Yeah.
You don't need a man because they're bitter.
Yeah, because they grew up in the feminist movement, those moms.
Yeah.
They were inundated with it.
Well, I know with my mother, my grandmother, I would see how my grandmother would my grandmother was married 3 times. They all passed away. But I would see how my grandmother would interact with my uncle. And then I see my mom, how she married my stepdad when I was very little. My dad died when I was like 2, but they weren't married. But then they got divorced when I was 14 and a half. But I see how my mom would interact, and it was very masculine. Mm-hmm. But I see my grandmother, how she talked with my uncle. It was very masculine. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so then I see now, understanding and reading and studying, I saw the trait come down to my mother. And now my mom's alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, my uncle and her live in the same house, right? Her half brother, because it was the grandmother's house. But my mom's alone. You know, no man there for her. And you know, she's bitter, sour. You know, and I'm not talking bad about her, but I've seen the results of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I try to talk to ladies and men about, you know, having healthy relationships, marriages. But what I get to push back on is I don't need a man. And I said, do you realize what's going to happen when you're older?
Yeah.
Because let's just be honest. You're in Orange County. Mm-hmm. 100K, you're broke.
Yeah, right.
Okay, you're in food, literally, because in Seattle, 100K, your poverty level is $96,000. So I said, how are you going to retire? What are you going to do? OnlyFans only works so long, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're doing all this stuff to make money. And I said, it's not a flex to say you're an independent woman. You're supposed to pay your bills and be responsible. Mm-hmm. That's not a flex. And I don't know how in their mind, and I don't know if you know what that means. That's not, flex is posturing like, ooh, look at me, I'm independent. I said, you never see a man say you're an independent man. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to, that's our responsibility. But if you're alone and single, you're supposed to pay your bills.
Right.
And so now I see this thing where it's almost like a throwback in the face of a man, like, I'm an independent woman. I don't need a man. It's like, what are you going to do when you get older? And they don't think past 2 years. Yeah. They don't think 5 years, 10 years out, right?
Yeah.
And so I see this trend pushing. So I want to ask you this. Now, I believe in marriages, but I have a challenge with modern day marriage laws.
Okay.
Do you think that the modern day marriage needs to be restructured through the courts? Because if marriage is about being married under the covenant of God, right? That's what marriage is. It doesn't say anywhere in there about a contract with the government. So my issue, and this is what men are having problems with, women are being rewarded for divorce in modern day America. And men are getting afraid to put put themselves out there. And this is my belief, and whether you agree or not, I'm not here to argue with you, but I believe if you get married through a pastor or a church or preacher, minister, and you get married on the covenant of God, you're married. Now, people are like, well, you need to sign a marriage license. Why? Why do you need a marriage license?
It's about the covenant and the commitment that you're making, that you're doing it under the law of the land, that you're signing a paper, you are committing yourself to this person in a signed agreement.
Okay, but did Adam and Eve back in the days, they didn't do that with court, though.
Yeah, I don't know when it started. I don't know.
But you see where I'm going? So now what happens is, as a man, you lose this leverage.
Okay, but to me, because I know I've heard men say, hey, it's not a good deal for men because when they get divorced, they lose half of everything. And my response to that is that's a really good incentive to make it work.
Right. So going, and I'm good. This is a good point. So going by the numbers, there's a 51% divorce rate.
Okay, it depends on what numbers you're looking at.
That's the Census Bureau numbers.
Okay, so Christian marriages have the highest rate of success when it comes to marriage.
Okay.
Now, there's some statistics that are skewed because a lot of men that we'll call nominal men, meaning in name only, men that profess to have some kind of evangelical background, they'll fill out surveys that say like, what's your faith, Protestant, whatever, and they'll check the box. But they're not necessarily men that go to church, if at all.
Well,
but they'll say, oh, you have that Christian background. So the numbers get skewed because the ones who actually are Christians that go to church at least 3 times a month, those marriages, those Christian families are the ones that have the highest rate of success in marriage.
So you're talking about active Christians.
Yes.
But how do you know that if all the Christians are filling it out and saying, like, I'm a Christian, right? If I miss church. But if you're saying an active, involved Christian, how do you know that number if all of them are filling it out?
Well, when they went back to the data and they looked at the ones who said that they are, and I don't know how they did the research.
Sure.
But I just found this out recently. The ones that said that they were Christians that actually were involved in church, like going to church on a regular basis. The nominal men were saying they were, but they never went to church.
Okay.
So that, I guess, is
so they were saying they were Christian by default. Like I was,
my family,
I was baptized, but I'm not active. Okay.
Right.
So because I know that there's a 75% of the divorces the women file, and 90% of the cases of that 75%, they're college educated women.
Okay.
I know that stat, but I didn't know the stat you're talking about.
Yeah.
But you see what happens with men. So now we're like, okay, we see the outcome, and you're right. Going in with that mindset, hey, it's going to fail, is a bad thing.
Right.
I agree with you. I'm just telling you I talk about this is where we're seeing this is reality.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So when guys come to me and I'm like, look, this is my mindset. It's like what outside of the biblical realm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about. You want to call us heathens or whatever, the people. If somebody says, well, what's a wife? What can a wife give you that a girlfriend can't give you? Right. Outside of the Bible, you see, because not everybody's a believer. I'm a believer.
Okay.
I'm on your page, but in reality, when you go out there and they're like, okay, well, I don't go to church or whatever. And I said, okay, what can a girlfriend or a wife give you that a girlfriend can't give you? And the problem that we're seeing right now is men are less and less men are wanting to get married because of the outcomes they're seeing, right? They're seeing their and it takes two people, but they're seeing their all their hard work and effort that they build up, and they're 35, 40, they get married, and then 7 years later it's gone. And yeah, she helps contribute, the 7 years, but everything's taken away. They lose their house, she stays in the house, the kids stay with the wife. We're seeing a very high failure rate with children that are raised by single mothers, right? Whether it's being incarcerated, drugs, murders, suicides. And the guys are getting a little apartment. They lose their retirement, their 401k. They see that happening to their uncles and dads, and they're like, wait a minute. Why do I need to do this? What's up? What's my upside? I have a zero net gain from a business perspective. Now, from a biblical perspective, I agree with you. That's not right. So this is what I'm seeing and what we're dealing with out here in society is more and more people are like, nah, I'm good. I'm good because we're seeing the masculine.
that too.
So,
Yeah.
how are you getting a lot of that?
Here's some other research. You probably have heard of psychologist Dr. John Gottman. And he's the reason he's so huge and people really look at his research is because with a 93.6 success rate, he can tell a couple, he can, within 15 minutes of meeting a married couple, he can tell if they're going to get divorced and how long it'll take to get divorced.
What's it? I've heard of this guy. I didn't know his name, but I've heard the guy talk about
what
this.
else he has found. And he does a thing where you come into this it's like an Airbnb, but it's actually a lab where he hooks the man and the woman up, and they have conversations, and they register their heart rate and all the stuff to tell when they're getting heated, what they're feeling, and he's got all the research. Anyway, so he says, and this, I have to admit, this surprised me because I put a lot of the onus on marriages working on women. I do. I think women are a huge part of the problem. But when I read his research, he said that the women are the ones that are trying to make the relationship work. They're the first ones to seek counseling. They're the first ones to read relationship books. They're the ones that are saying, come on, let's go get therapy. And
I believe that. I do believe that.
Yes,
I believe that.
And even when they are trying to respect the man and trying to, be a good wife, a lot of times the men don't respond. And in his research, he said, the numbers came out that the responsibility for the marriage failing or succeeding is on the men. It falls on the men. And if you think about it, that's right where God put the responsibility to, biblically, is on the men. The man is the head of the home.